All right, everybody, and welcome back. This is the Enough to Keep Going show. We are here for 310. Wow, 310, right? I can't even, that's why it took me a little while to get through that introduction there, because Enough to Keep Going 310, that is quite the accomplishment, gentlemen. It's glad to have all three of us here. We are recording here on October 1st. But we are looking back on the final week of September of 2023. Joining me tonight, as usual, are all three of us are here, which is excellent. Towmaster, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. And after that heroic intro music, I want to say Avengers Assemble.
It was, right? There's a little bit of, like, sometimes I feel like I'm doing an 80s montage in Rocky. Sometimes I'm feeling like I'm riding on horseback with a sword charging. Sometimes I'm jumping through a portal to fight off Thanos. So, but all three of those are not games that we are playing tonight. So, Game Logic, although it was the end of September and Crystal Dynamics Marvel's Avengers was delisted from the marketplace. So, after quite the uneventful final hurrah back in March when they released everything. But Game Logic, we're not here to talk about failed games as services, at least not this week in the news. But how are you, sir?
I think we will be talking about a few failures of games as a service, or some things as a service. Maybe a matter of opinion, or maybe sometimes when people get laid off, even though things aren't failures. But we'll be talking about that tonight.
That's a very good point, right? Like, last week, after spending time talking about Unity and some layoffs and talking about how Unreal and Epic have not been doing any, we got some news this week that they are laying off 16% of their employment of their employees, which also allowed us a chance to double check our math from last week in terms of the number of employees, but we will get to that eventually. But first off, as we always do here on the Enough to Keep Going show, we will be talking about some of our big games of the week, whether these are new or just memorable, notable game experiences that we want to hit on and spend some time with. So this past Friday, EA FC Football Club 24 launched on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch. Last week I had played the trial of it on Xbox Series X, and I had pre-ordered the Switch version because I was very excited, curious, supportive of EA actually putting a full-fledged sports game on their console. But gentlemen, if you will notice, that is not in my playlist for this week because I actually looking at reviews, they all looked pretty solid. Graphics are Switch-esque. I think it was a combination of I knew that I wanted it physically, and there wasn't anything immediately available to me, and my week was busier than I expected. And the more that I played it on Series X on a 4K TV with blades of grass, it was like, I don't know. I'm okay just waiting for a sale, I think, at this point. But Game Logic, you picked it up as well, but you picked up the PlayStation 5 version. So first off, why? Why the PlayStation 5? Why Football Club? And also, how's it treating you?
All right. Well, first I'll loop back on your. So just so I follow. So you pump the brakes on ordering the physical Nintendo Switch version.
Yes. Yep.
Now, but you're continuing to play it on Xbox, or had you purchased it, or you play? I mean, how are you?
Still making my way through the 10-hour trial.
Okay.
So,
okay.
On Xbox, right? I feel in some ways like if I haven't eaten through 10 hours, and like maybe once I do, then I'll have to decide if I'm going to keep playing it. But rather than dropping $60 on the Switch one or $70 on a next gen one, I'm going to make my way through and see if I'm still playing it or if it's one of those where I played it because of the hype and now I'm falling off of it. So, but you, sir, which modes are you playing?
So as always, I only play one mode. I guess maybe arguably, even though I'm paying for all of the other ones, I don't mess with any of those. So which is always kind of interesting because when people have their knocks and their negatives about like, these various sports games, and and they're offended by like a thing happening in this mode and a thing happening in that mode. I'm like, I just like, it doesn't bother me because I never touch that. So I am playing, what is the closest thing to what I would call a franchise mode in it, which is the manager's mode, which I also, when I go back to those years where we've talked about, there are things that I just think should be a standard. Like, I feel like all first person shooters, there should be literally an IEEE spec that specifies the controls for a first-person shooter so that they all operate the same. Just like I feel like for like gaming chairs or chairs, like all of them should. Like, I hate getting in like, you go to an office. This is a slight segue, but you go to an office, you go to a new office chair, and like the handle for like what raises and lowers the chair is always in like a different place. I'm like, why is this just not a spec? So it's the same on every single chair. So at any rate,
how do they make it feel special and unique if they don't put it in an awkward spot so it's different?
Right, exactly. What I really hate about office chairs is the lumbar support, is the tilt thing, because I always want my chairs to be rigidly upright. I never want them to like lean back when I lean on them. So finding that control is the one that's really always in a different place. But at any rate, my point is, I really wish all of these sports games would just call the franchise mode. It's like they all have to call it like something different. So I always have to dig around and dig through all the comments and dig through all the descriptions. And then not all of the descriptions are very intuitive. So EA FC24 is a great, for instance, like you go in this thing called a manager's mode. Now, a manager's mode intuitively tells you that you're not playing soccer. And it makes you think that this is going to be something like Football Club Manager or something like that. But it's not. It's actually just their franchise mode. You can control the team on the pitch if you want to. You can actually, it's actually neat. You can go into tactical mode and you can just watch the game and only intervene when you choose to. You can actually play the game, but just have it play highlights. So you don't have to play the whole game. It simulates parts of the game and then it zooms you in on the action when a given event is going to happen. But I'm just playing it plain old-fashioned, regular way, franchise mode. I'm gonna, see if I get offers to be hired by other teams as their coach and stuff. There's a little bit of kind of where I didn't do create your own team. So the team that I'm playing is at least loosely based on some actual cup league affiliation, and you can pick some slight customization details in there, like exactly how you want your stadium to look and things like that. So I'm playing I'm playing a team out of Denmark in like one of their leagues, you choose your own tactics, which I think is a little, that's like a thing that you can do in NHL, but I don't know that it forces you to, whereas this one, if you're playing in the manager mode, at least it forces you to, you pick from an array of kind of tactical leanings. And then you hire coaching staff, which I think was another nice touch. I don't know that that's always been there. I don't think that's always been there in EA.
I think in the manager mode, they did a bunch of work, as I was reading about it for this year. They did a bunch of work with it last year, and it seems like it's pretty similar to last year with a few tweaks, but it's relatively recent that they've added some of these pieces to it.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. You can hire, at least for my club, I can hire up to like 8 managers, and each manager has... one is they have an affinity for the given tactic that you're employing for your team, and they have like a power ranking for that. But then they also each have, scores in the areas of attack, defense, like 2 other score factors in there. So, when you can hire up to like 4 coaches whose specialty is attack. The one with the highest star rating or whatever will be designated as like the head attack coach. So there are little things in like that, because I don't know, even though I enjoy playing soccer, it's like baseball, I don't know all like the little nuances of the rules and the ins and outs. And so it's kind of neat that that's teaching you. Another great teaching thing that I really like is before, I don't know if this is going to happen through the regular season, but at least before each of the games that I'm playing now, it gives you like a little training mission beforehand, which you can choose to do or choose not to do. If you do it, it adds to, your player scores that your players will get like a perk, and it's like players on a squad. So like the first game I chose like a defensive drill, and it has like 4 or 5 different drill categories, and then within each category it has another 4 or 5 drills. So it's a fairly robust, like I'm accustomed to each, games, sports games that do this. They give you like the option for like one drill or maybe a maximum of 3 drills beforehand. They're not particularly robust.
Yeah, and Madden, you get like 3 as you're going. Like it rotates between, or like in MLB The Show, you get a few, but you get it's only giving you a subsection of what's all there.
Yeah, and sometimes they're like really corny or really kind of dumb drills, in my opinion. This one, again, because I don't know, because I'm not that familiar with this game. Like, EA, FIFA, I keep wanting to call it FIFA, EAFC 24. Like, you can easily, very quickly, you're going to pick up the basics. But, like, there's so many there's such depth of nuance in player control on offense and defense, and of course the wackadoodle thing of where that flip flops back and forth, given the direction the ball is going. So the first drill I did like a defensive drill where I knew the basics of like getting a player in between, but I didn't know all the things about like tackling, which is a weird soccer term because tackling is not what we think of tackling is, but and they taught you which button to pull, to kind of go into like the equivalent of an NBA, because you're going to talk about NBA a little bit tonight, going into like a defensive stance, right, as you're backpedaling, but then also tackling to try and get the ball away from the person. And then the second game I did an offensive drill where, and this is what I mean about, I picked up the basic surface level stuff of passing and shooting, but I don't know that I would have dug through the menus at any point to figure out lobbing or why you lob or how to lob. But I just happened to pick a drill that taught me how to lob, and then that increased, the width of my offensive arsenal, because I probably would have never deliberately gone after that. So it's been pretty neat. It controls great on the pitch. One thing, we always have this problem when we go into these sports games. It's digging through the menus and figuring how to tweak the game and get it to your likings. I set my half length to 20 minutes because I felt like that was going to be like a good sweet spot for me. But then when you start your season, it offers you the opportunity to play in one of like 3 cups as part of the preseason. And for some reason, it's what it looks like is it's responding to me changing certain game settings. So like the first match I played at the amateur level, and then the second match I played at like the pro level. And I could tell that the game had adjusted that, but the game has not taken my half length game setting. So I think it's doing that for the cups and for the preseason, because you're in the cup, and I assume it'll flip to 20-minute halves when I go into regular season. So we'll just see how it looks. But the game controls great. It plays nice. It's weird and funky to me that it does not have any options for performance versus quality mode. It just entirely goes off the PlayStation preset, as far as I can tell. I don't know whether or not there's actually any difference in how it renders. I'm playing on a 32-inch monitor, so it's set at 1440p, and so it may simply play at 60 frames per second, no matter whether you're at 4K, 1440, or 1080, is what I suspect.
That's what I've read, that it's pretty solid at 60.
Yeah, but it's fun. It's rocks. It's pretty solid. Plays fluidly. Really liking it, and looking forward to playing a good chunk of it. As I go throughout the season.
Nice. When's the last time that you dove into a FIFA or a soccer game?
It's another one of those games that I buy like every single year, but I've probably dabbled with FIFA less than MLB The Show, I would say. Definitely less than NHL. And far less, F1 series is one that I buy every single year too, but I actually play that pretty extensively, each year. But FIFA, and I want to say, I think maybe I've only bought, it may be true that I've only actually bought FIFA on the Switch. I think I've bought 2 years worth of FIFA on the Switch, so I think this might be the first full console one that I've actually paid. I think I've played past seasons, through EA Play / Game Pass.
Sure.
Yep. But yeah. Yep.
Nice. Yeah, I'll be curious to hear more. I definitely haven't had a chance this week to get back to it too much, but I definitely am going to keep playing it. It's also one of those where I think it's been probably FIFA 21 was the last time that I spent any significant time with it. So it'd be interesting to do a check-in every once in a while. Tao, you have 2 games on here, one that I am very familiar with, but one that I am not so sure of. So Paleopines. What is it, and how did you stumble across it?
This one actually, it's one of the, I guess what they call the cozy games as of late, and I think it was on one of those directs maybe this past year. It might even have come out on one of the Nintendo directs also. But it's basically kind of like Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley type of game.
It's
You
Stardew
get it
Valley with dinosaurs. Yes, now I do remember it
basically,
on
yeah,
one of the
yeah.
directs. Yep.
But in 3D, so this is fully 3D. It's not kind of top down like sprite based like Stardew is or some of the other games. But yeah, you start off. You have to move to this island with dinosaurs because you have a dinosaur pet, and you get a plot of land, and you can farm and you can craft stuff and you can mine stuff and stuff like that. So pretty general stuff so far that I've been doing. I've only played like about 3 hours or so ish. I was just looking at the time actually while your game logic was talking because I was trying to figure out how long I'd been playing, but still
So is this
the very
something you were looking forward to, or is it kind of one of those where like it filled a gap in your I needed a cozy game, I needed a farming sim type of thing?
yeah. I wanted something a little bit slower and slower paced than Starfield, which is probably obviously the only other game I've been playing lately, past few weeks. So I just wanted something that was a little more relaxing, And yeah, I got other games I can always go back to Animal Crossing if I wanted to, or something else. But this one looked interesting just because once again it had dinosaurs and big dinosaur fan. So obviously that was one of the big reasons I played Ark and still play Ark. I've kind of been bouncing off in and out of that for the past few weeks with my son. He wanted to play again. But this is a little bit more chill. I got my little plot of land now. I'm starting to clear it out and build up, everything that I got on my land, and just kind of wandering the little bit of the world that's opened up to me because there's some stuff that's still locked right now. And I lost my train of thought. I was going to say something. Now I can't remember. But anyways, yeah. So just like I said, I'm still pretty early into this one.
Does it feel like it's doing anything different in that kind of Stardew Valley, Fay Farm kind of farming crafting piece, or are you catching dinosaurs as well, or are there things that the dinosaurs come into play with?
Yeah, eventually I will be able to collect dinosaurs. So that was another big so you kind of have like that Pokemon aspect, I guess, too, where you can collect stuff. So there's a bunch of dinosaurs running around right now. I can't get anything right now. I think I still have to talk to people, and still learning some things. Like I just now got my farming tools and shovel. I got a shovel, a hoe, and a watering can. So the little bit of farming. I haven't done really any digging or anything yet. I didn't have to use that. I'm not sure what I even needed to use the shovel for yet in this particular game. But that was kind of the other thing, I guess. The one kind of bad and good thing is you have to wait like days, to do certain things or certain events to, unlock and, open up to you. But it's not real time like Animal Crossing is. So it's an in-game day, which is probably like 5 or 10 minutes, I think, when it turns to night and day. So it's not as bad as Animal Crossing was because sometimes they got kind of annoying. Like, hey, I want to build a new building, but I got to wait a real in-game or a real world day. Here, I could just wait, or I could even just go to sleep if I wanted to. So it's actually kind of nice too. So it looks like I'll be able to advance a little bit further, hopefully this week, and start actually collecting other dinosaurs and doing other stuff within the game. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, these games seem to be, they kind of take that mobile game spot for you of something that you pick at, something that you grab kind of in between things or at the end of a night as a wind down. Because you usually have something like this. So I could see you sticking with this type of game.
Yeah, and I got it on the Switch, so I mean that's perfect for me. I'm sitting in bed, lying in bed, my wife's reading or whatever. So that's what I usually do. I'll just play on my Switch. So usually it's Rocket League, but now I can, I can pick away at this. So it's actually kind of nice.
Nice. So the other game came out of early access this week, is free to play. It is the Gameloft's Disney SpeedStorm. So this is the Disney based kart racer out on all platforms. It had come out back in the spring, I want to say April
or May. Yeah.
Yep. In terms of early access. So I picked it up way back then. We talked about it a little bit on the show at the time. I've kind of chipped away at it on and off. I didn't do a lot with this last season before it hit launch. We're now in season 4, which is the Aladdin season. But Tal, this is the first time that you're picking it up, so I'm really curious as a new player, how was your onboarding? How are you finding the economy? How are you finding the gameplay?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was kind of like you. I was kind of surprised that it's actually a pretty competent kart racer. It's actually really good, like really responsive. Even on, and I have this on the Switch also. I was gonna try to play it on Xbox, just kind of compare the two, but I didn't get a chance to yet. And obviously, graphically, it'd probably be better. But even on the Switch, I mean, it looks really nice. It looks really good. I don't see any like graphical error problems or anything like that. But just the kart racing itself is pretty solid. You got the I think you had mentioned this, the old school kind of drift that you can do, kind of drift that kind of builds up your turbo meter, your speed
Boost up.
meter,
Yep.
yeah, your nitro. So that's kind of nice. And then you got your one thing is I think a little bit different. I think some of the Mario Kart tracks have this, but it seems like almost every track I've played so far on SpeedStorm, I keep want to call it MotorStorm. That's the old PlayStation, I think, racer.
Yep.
SpeedStorm is they have those kind of like turbo pads, but it seems like there's a lot more in this game that I think I remember ever being in Mario Kart.
Yeah, there's a lot of the boost pads, and in some ways they mechanically, they also they fill up your turbo meter. So I think that that's partly why they're there as frequently, because if you hit them, you're also kind of charge your turbo meter in addition to just drifting.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. Yeah, I thought it was just the drifting that you charged. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. And then there's also that like weird. It's like a grinding rail that you can like jump on
Mhm.
sometimes or like hit, and then you like kind of grind through it. So I don't know if is that a speed thing? Does that make you go faster, or is it just
It usually is like a shortcut, right? Like
okay?
if you jump on the rail, you can either drive up on it or there's actually a jump button in the cars. If you don't know that,
I did not know that.
yeah.
That's good to
So
know.
some of these, as you go through some of the tracks, it is hard. You actually have to jump from rail to rail, almost like a ratchet and clank type of way.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, there is a jump button. It should be whatever the left-hand button on the Switch is, right?
Okay,
It's
that makes
not.
sense because I thought as I was going through some of these tracks, some of the tracks or some of the parts of the track that kind of overlap on each other. So I thought I saw somebody like jump onto like off of over a wall at one point and like hit one of those things. I was like, well, how did he do that? Like I thought maybe it was just like there's a speed boost there or something I didn't see, but that was kind of interesting. I'll have to go back and check that out. But yeah, I mean the tracks seem pretty nice. Like you
Mhm.
said, there's a lot of shortcuts. Fairly large for the most part, like pretty open. And I think there's 10 racers, maybe 8 racers. Can't remember what the total amount.
So how many you started as a free-to-play player? How
Yeah.
many racers do you have at your disposal? How many are unlocked to begin with?
Well, I only had one so far, which is
Okay.
Mickey. It was just the first one. So I just meant in the when I was talking about 8 to 10, I thought I was talking about the actual race, like how many cars you go
Oh yeah, I
against.
think there's 10 in
Yeah.
the like
So
in each heat. Yeah.
yeah, I thought I unlocked another one, but I didn't see it like when I went to go races last couple times. I think it was I can't remember her name. Hercules' girlfriend or friend
Mm.
from the animated movie. So I thought it looked like I had opened her up, but when I went in there, like all I could pick was Mickey. Still, I was like,
So
I
it's
don't know what that is.
possible that so the way that the mechanics and the way that the economy works is that you get shards for racers, and you need
Right.
10 shards to unlock a new racer. So in
Uh,
some of your boxes or in some of the wins that you'll claim, you may get a shard, you may get 4 shards. But so it may feel like you're getting something toward that person, but you're not actually unlocking that person yet.
okay, that's probably what it was then. Yeah, yeah. Because then other than that, I've just been unlocking like the colors and wheels and stuff like that. Which I don't. Does that the wheels and the I think they had like a spoiler one time I unlocked. That
Yeah,
doesn't do anything for
I
your car,
think
right?
it's mostly cosmetic. Like
Okay, that's
the
what it looked like. Because there's like no description. Like you go to it and it just says like this is like a spoiler or whatever. It has a little description, but it's the same thing as far as
yeah, eventually you end
speeds
up
up.
unlocking what they're called, like pit crews or crew members,
Mhm.
where they're characters associated with that IP. So, right, like the current season is Aladdin based, and so one of the crew members is the king or the Cave of Wonders. Like in Mickey, Donald, Goofy, one of the crew members, well, is Chip and Dale, the chipmunks, right? So
Mhm.
and then they'll give you different boosts, like
Oh,
like
okay.
they may give you top speed, handling, acceleration, things like that. And it's, some may be stronger in ones or the others. And as you star up your character, again, this is a game loft game with some gotcha mechanics. So guess what? Your character starts at star 1, can go up to, I think, star 5. And as you progress each star level, you can add more pit crew characters, more, support characters that then continue to supplement and boost your existing kind of level and abilities.
Okay. So now I've only played the single player, so it's like the campaign. I didn't do any multiplayer. Have you played the multiplayer? And does that pit crew, those people or whatever, those items or whatever, does that factor into that then?
So in the multiplayer, I haven't played the multiplayer since the free to play launch, but looking at it, it looks pretty similar to what it was during the early access period. And there were 2 main modes in the multiplayer that you would play: a ranked mode. And basically it breaks down into, you play a normed mode where everybody's at the same level, and you play like a free for all where you bring your character in that can be at whatever level you want. You'll get different rewards for each, right? Like there's definitely the pay to win option in the bring in what you got versus but playing in kind of the normed mode where everybody's standardized, it's really solid. Like it one of the things that it does really well, which I think is, no matter how you feel about the gotcha mechanics, no matter how you feel about kind of the pay to win and the loot box aspects of it all, one of the things that it does so well for families is in local multiplayer, every character is unlocked. All your tracks are unlocked. All your characters are there. So if you're playing with kids and somebody really wants to be Aladdin, but you haven't spent the money on the battle pass for this season, you can still play as Aladdin. Like that, I think, is a real nice, it's a family friendly piece. It's it works, it cuts both ways, right? Like it's a way to try out these characters, because then when you get into the shop and suddenly they're for sale, now it incentivizes you because you want to unlock that to play through some of the other modes versus just the local multiplayer. But for a kart racer, it's still incredibly solid. Like I've been playing it. I set it down for months. I played a little bit in season 2 when it moved to Toy Story, did the local multiplayer with my son just to try out each of the different racers, but never really progressed through the season pass or any of the other stuff. And so coming back into it, it's still just a really solid kart racer. Reading online, looking at people talking, reading through the Reddit thread on it, the sub on it, that people that are higher end, one of the things they did in the switch over from early access to free to play is that they changed the economy, that like the different types of shards of upgrade materials that you would get, the different upgrade materials that you would get, they changed those without really notifying the community. Like they just changed them over the next day. So there was definitely some feedback in that first day of it going free to play that people were sitting on all kinds of materials, and basically every early access player got the same amount of conversion materials. So they've since come out on Reddit and said, or in their, community manager pages, to say that they're working on a thank you gift for those people that were affected by the changeover. They haven't said what it is, so which at least is good. I think it would have been relatively easy for them just to communicate it and have people churn through their previous materials. But I think as somebody who's used both systems, the current system, the new free to play one, the economy there is more straightforward. It's a little easier to, it's a little easier to figure out. It's a little more user friendly. In the first 10 levels, it's relatively straightforward. The next 10, it's really when you get into like the level 25 and above is where you start getting into some of the harder to grind, harder to acquire materials for leveling people up. So I'm not there as a casual player. I'm playing it. I've played it each night since it went free to play on Thursday. But I'm playing for like a half hour or an hour. First night I played for like 2 hours because I thought, I could just do one more race. but it is like, if you're churning through this content, there's only so much you can do. Like, there are daily missions, there are weekly missions that build your season pass, but like, as a jump in and jump out, like if you're not trying to grind to unlock certain characters and just want to play a kart racer, it's a really good kart racer. I would say I've played it both on PlayStation 5, which is where I had early access, and on Series X. Linking them together, really easy. So it'd be easy, if you did want to play it on Series X, it's easy enough to not to use your same profile. It's simply just a code that you put in, you generate it on one platform, enter the code on the other platform, and they link them together. So it's pretty user friendly in that way. But it's a really solid kart racer. And I think the challenge will be, given that it is free to play, when do you hit that kind of wall, right? Where you can no longer progress because you don't have a character that's what I haven't experienced. I've seen it bits and pieces, but I have enough characters from the early access where, like, I needed in chapter 2 of the Aladdin missions, you needed to have either a character from Aladdin or a character from Toy Story. And if you didn't, you couldn't do that race, right? So I think that it has a potential to gate people in a way that eventually forces them into the pay model. But how quickly they do that and how frequently they do that is really going to speak to how accessible this game will continue to be to me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the cross, I guess, progression or save from the system, since you played on both. But I didn't notice, though, you have to you log in as your game. You can log in with a GameLoft account, and then I think when I was on that site, it like lists the different systems where you can like connect it to it. So I think I already did that. So if I do jump over to Xbox, or when I do, I should be able to bring everything over. So since you played the early access, did you have everything from early access that you unlocked as far as racers?
So I have. I mean, they all carried over with me. I didn't unlock everybody.
Or
So like,
just what you had, yeah.
Yeah, anybody that I had, and then any of the, like, in the intro 3 chapters, like the Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, anything that I had claimed before, I got additional bonuses now. Like, I spent the first half hour of the free to play time just claiming all the stuff that I had previously unlocked, as it gave me more materials. So there was that piece to it. But I didn't lose anything. In terms of just the economy changeover is really the only difference. But mechanics wise, it all feels, they've done a little bit more with the rubber banding. The first season was really strong in rubber banding, and they've continued to adjust that a little bit in terms of the AI. So yeah,
I didn't. So far, I think it's been close a few times. Like I know you can upgrade, like I said, you can upgrade your character. I've had to do that finally, because some of the races I was like, I barely got into, I think first or second or so. So, but yeah, it seems pretty good right now, at least for now. Like I said, I'm only through the first 5 or 6 chapters of that campaign, so not too far in, I don't think.
Yeah, like I'm really high on it in terms of the gameplay. My only biggest concern is, like, when that free to play monster rears its head. And it's possible that it's going to be far enough out that for a lot of people, it's, if you're not playing this constantly on a stream, you may not run into it very quickly. I think that the aspect of, unlocking characters, leveling them up, the level up piece is where you will probably hit your first friction point, where if you don't have a character leveled at the race level that they're encouraging, it can be, as you found out, right? It can be really tough to win those races, because you can run a really clean race, but your top speed is always going to be slower than everybody else if they're at a higher level. And so I think that piece is potentially where you hit friction points for some people. So that's plenty of time on a free-to-play game, but it's a good kart racer all in all. So it'll be interesting to see as you play through it some more. we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I wish there
So
kind of was a few more powers. It seems like it's not as. Maybe I just use the Mario Kart because there's so many different ones. It just seems like there's a little. It's not as. I don't say it's not as varied. It's just not a lot of powers. It seems it's like almost same like 5 or so.
I think it's probably that's about right. Like you get
Yeah.
used to what they are, and you can choose. You get them. You end up using them a little more strategically once you get used to them. Everybody has the speedway power, SpeedStorm power is different. Like the SS is different for each character, so it is depending on that character, they do something related. Like Genie has 3 wishes, and so he gets 3 different powers when he does that.
Okay.
Right. So they do some fun stuff with it. Like Donald is great because he has like 8 fists flying off his car that just run into everybody else, like when he's punching people. So, they do well by the IP. So, speaking of IP, let's move into the news. And a number of companies continue the tech industry trend of laying off people. Game Logic, your first story here is related to Activision Blizzard and some Hearthstone staff layoffs.
Yep. So this article over on VG 2040, VG 24/7, 247. I don't know what I'm saying now. By Connor McCarr. Activision Blizzard has quietly laid off several staff from its Hearthstone team in what the company has called organizational changes. This has left former staff, one of which was close to 20 years at the company, looking for work. And so this is another one of these, I hate to say it, but layoff stories, which I think is a thing that I can say is a thing in 2023, where, there really wasn't necessarily an announcement, so to speak, that this, was happening or was going to happen. But many of the employees, took to LinkedIn or took to Twitter, because they were obviously now, trying to hit up contacts. And that's where people started picking up on it. As far as we could tell, it affected 10 people or so on the team. The Hearthstone team isn't that big to begin with. But, part of the weirdism in this one is that, according to everyone, including Blizzard themselves, Hearthstone was doing good. Now, I don't know whether or not Hearthstone was moving the needle for them in terms of notoriety. It's not a title that I even really remember of or think about, until I see a story like this pop. So I'm not sure if they were, victim of, a game as a service that was doing well in terms of having a loyal fan base, but not doing a lot in terms of how the company viewed, their ownership of mindshare and kind of how people thought about them and building brand awareness and that type of thing. So I don't know. Any other feelings that you guys had on this one?
It's kind of funny you mentioned about the kind of like the awareness out there because I was talking with my friend a few weeks ago, and I think he brought up, I don't know if it was Activision or some other. He's brought up Activision for some reason, and we were talking about just different games, and I asked him, is Hearthstone even still? I thought Hearthstone had been shut down, but I was thinking of Heroes of the Storm. I think that was the one had been just like totally not supported anymore. And,
yeah, I mean its servers are still running, but there's no new. Yeah.
But I didn't realize, and I was thinking Hearthstone for some reason. So, and I thought it was gone too, maybe. But he was like, no, it's still going. Like they're still doing, content and stuff. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't really hear about it. Like I used to hear a lot about that game before. Maybe it is just slowing down. So that might be part of it, possibly. I know in the article too, they had mentioned they had just released a new, a new mode, I believe. I can't find it here now, but it looked like there was a new mode that they had released not too long ago. So it looked like it was doing fine. So
yeah, they continue to add modes to it. They've had different seasons, they've had different campaigns with it. But I do think, as Game Logic said, like how much that it's growing, or is it in the kind of World of Warcraft space of it had really strong numbers and now it is just holding those or slowly decreasing those numbers, but at a rate where it's still financially feasible to maintain it, but maybe not at the same staff level.
And the other thing I think for this game that may have been problematic in terms of, customer loyalty and really generating, maybe larger numbers was, I just always think of this as a mobile game. which is why, it just kind of goes out of my headspace, when I see it kind of come across my windshield. And so that may have played into it as well in terms of, the decision making of, and I bring that up because, I'm trying to remember, I guess it was maybe early last year that we had a similar situation, right? In terms of, a layoff that kind of caught us off guard because we normally think of the game that studio does as doing fairly well. And that was, EA Sports' layoff last year of, not sports, of EA's layoff last year of people working Apex Legends Mobile. So, a game that by all accounts was doing well, and moving the needle and doing the thing it needed to do financially. But, when it came time to look at, investment being made versus upside, the decision was made to maybe not invest as much. And so, Hearthstone's not shut down. It lost 10 people. Which it's hard to tell whether or not that was the kind of layoff that starts cutting into bone in terms of, hitting high performers. Look, I'm not saying this because I'm making a judgment or just trying to be, harsh or uncaring, but, it mentions, one of the former staff, and I've seen this particular individual noted a couple times, close to 20 years at the company. And I'm like, when it's time to start doing layoffs, employees that have put in a lot of time that aren't particularly fungible, that you don't know how much you're going to be able to repurpose them to work on a different thing. I mean, those are the types of employees that sometimes become casualties, right? When you go through and do things like this, versus employees who aren't so deep, in one given thing, where they can maybe be applied, broadly, or there's a breadth of assignments that they can be, given. So,
well, and even just crassly, employees that are not so highly paid, right? Like if it really comes down to hitting a bottom line, I mean, whether or not I agree with hitting a bottom line for investors, but when you look at who's going to take chunks out of that deficit, you think about how many people you can lose 4 people at this rate, or I need to lose 8 at a different rate. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Because typically, for people who haven't seen the inside baseball layoffs a lot, you're right. It's typically there's a target, right? Whether or not that's a monetary target of how much overall company budget needs to be cut. That breaks down to people. Sometimes it's just numbers of people. Like we need, and typically the way it actually rolls out, it's probably not this way in this case, but typically there's a period where there's a voluntary separation that's offered where they say, hey, if you get out now, you're going to get this kind of severance package, or you can roll the dice, right, and see if you're going to be, one of the people, cut, and say if the target is, hey, we need to let 100 employees go, then, the hope is, some number will take the voluntary separation package, and let's say 20 take it. Now you only have to lay off 80. But so it's unfortunate. I don't think not the big thing here, but I think in terms of analysis, I don't know that this says much of anything about any kind of like major shift in Activision strategy or, a different approach on content. I mean, this is, I hate to say it, but this is like, business as usual, right, for an Activision business unit, right? It's kind of what you would expect is, this is one of the companies that, much like EA has had a reputation for doing in the past, if they've got targets they have to hit, they are going to tighten the belt, typically before bad things happen. And I don't know whether or not you could look at that as a good thing. But it is what it is.
Well, I think the other piece of this for layoffs, for game company layoffs, that there is that difference between a company that shipped a game, struggled, didn't hit its numbers, or just a game was not successful, and there's not the funding investment to maintain it, right? The rivals of Atheum Studio that shipped their game and proceeded to lay off half the people because either sales targets or just the kind of staff up around trying to push out a game release, versus our next story in terms of sometimes it's about that there's not money there because there's not money there. And then sometimes it's about we're not hitting the target that we want to hit. There's not as much money as we want there. Right. And that becomes kind of where we move into the story with Epic Games, who throughout many of these layoffs over the last year, Tim Sweeney's been out there talking about the stability of Epic, the profitability of Epic. And then this week, Game Logic, as you finish your drink, we get the next news story related to Epic laying off 16% of its workforce, about 830 employees, and divesting itself from some of its, spinning off a couple different places and selling off a few pieces as well. So walk us through what you got, Game Logic.
Yeah, so the tail of the tape here is don't throw stones when your house is made of glass. Epic obviously trying to capitalize and jump on the misfortune of one of its competitors. When things started kind of death spiraling at Unity last week, a couple of weeks ago. And then turnabout is fair play here. This story over on Engadget by Malik Saleh. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. Epic Games is laying off 16% of its workforce and selling Bandcamp. Now, Fortnite maker Epic Games is laying off 16% of its staff, or about 830 employees. CEO Tim Sweeney said in an open letter to employees that Epic Games has been spending way more money than it earns. We concluded that layoffs are the only way, he wrote, that doing them now and on the scale will stabilize our finances. So I think one of the things that we may see a cycle of in the gaming industry, but because we're seeing the cycle in the tech industry overall, is pandemic happened. Some companies started making a lot more money. Some companies wanted to capitalize on that and expand. And
not only that they were making more money, but money was super cheap, right? You could borrow money. Interest rates are really low. People were looking for it. It was a better investment to invest in other companies than it was to put it into something more stable or a more traditional kind of investment for a company.
Yeah, because part of what went on here is I don't know that Epic made any acquisitions that I can think of here, but obviously, one of the things that's kind of funny, not funny, but interesting is as we started kind of pulling some of this apart from a metrics perspective is, Epic has something like 26 subsidiaries. So it's it's just interesting. When we go back a couple of weeks ago, I made mention that, it looks like Epic only has like 3,700 employees. And I think part of that was the problem of it's difficult to track just exactly what Epic is because, number one, they're not a publicly traded company. So I think the problem is a lot of their metrics, a lot of their numbers and things aren't on the books anywhere. But the other problem is that, like I said, they have 26 subsidiaries, so it's difficult to get a handle on just how many employees there are. If you back into the number of 830 being 16%, it gives you that they have just under about 5,200 employees. Some of those subsidiaries include Harmonix, Mediatonic, who's the studio that does Fall Guys,
and that Psyonix. Was a studio. So Mediatonic was a studio that was purchased in this window post-pandemic. Like Fall Guys came out right as the pandemic was happening, hit big, and then Epic bought them up. So that is one of those studios that falls in that window of time that we were talking about.
Yep, and then no, not at all. And then one of our co-hosts' favorites, Mr. Talmaster, they also own Psyonix, who does Rocket League. And then they own Chair Entertainment, as we were reminded last week or a couple of weeks ago when the chief creative officer who came out of Chair Entertainment chose to leave the company. So here we have, like I said, 830 or so employees who are being laid off because Epic needs to tighten the belt. And the causality behind it is that, they've been spending way too much money, according to Tim Sweeney. So part of that money that they're spending is in legal fees because they've been suing the heck out of everybody and taking court cases to the Supreme Court and, all types of circuit courts. And, they've been fined $530 million by the FTC, I think, total. So, yes, they're making money. I wouldn't necessarily say hand over fist, but they're doing good with Unreal as an engine. They're obviously getting a lot of mind share because every time new consoles launch and every time console power needs to be shown off, Unreal tends to be the engine of record, that people, that the companies point to. But all is not fair and rosy in Bethlehem. It appears to be the case. And then and then now spooling off Bandcamp, which was, I think, when we were all here when that went down a few years ago, we were like, what is that all about? And I think we created some maybe we rationalized a little bit that it made sense in certain ways, but clearly, if you're trying to shoot for maximum efficiency, that Bandcamp is the one that here's this one thing that is not like the others, that it's maybe time for them to divest themselves of.
Tao, any thoughts here?
No, just one other comment. Also, it was announced, I think, Friday. Let me see what it was. I can't see on this article, but they're going to increase the V-Bucks in Fortnite once again. Now, it looks like it's about $1, at least for the first couple of tiers, because there's different, like 1,000, 2,800, 5,000, 13,500, which I didn't even know was a thing, was the 13,000 one. But so it seems to be about $1 or so increment. So $7.99 to $8.99 for the $1,000 or the 1,000 V-Bucks, and kind of so on. So that was just another thing that kind of popped up, I think, right before the weekend also. So that was kind of interesting and it's still cheaper than what it was actually before, because it was about I think $10 originally when it first came out for the $1,000, or maybe like $9.50 or something like that. But and then they did with the Apple thing that happened. They bumped they actually decreased the price for a while, and a lot of the not just the V-Bucks, but even a lot of the skins and stuff that you could buy in their store, the in-game store, they had discounted like about $2 to $3, sometimes even $5, depending on if it was like a bundle or not. So it was just kind of interesting that they're bumping that up too now, kind of along with all these other announcements that they did.
Well, one of the things they got their hand slapped about by the FTC was about kids, minors buying V-Bucks, right? Because it was, apparently the accusation was that it was very easy to just buy V-Bucks arbitrarily without really kind of knowing what you were doing, or when parents, I guess, wound up being charged large sums of money, which, that's not anything new. I mean, every mobile game is guilty of that. Apple and Google are guilty of that, but, all of them at some point, right, get their comeuppance and, get their knuckles wrapped about that type of practice. The other thing that I think this causes us to question is, today, Fortnite is still off of the Google Play Store and the Apple Store. So, it makes one wonder if the upside of getting all that money, your Fortnite money yourself, without the 30%, wedge that you have to pay, to Apple or Google. And if Epic had played nice, and I'm not saying they should have, I've applauded them for, going after those, monopsonies, if you want to call it that, and just raising that topic up as something that should be discussed. Not necessarily saying that anybody should have, one party should have won that court case or the other, but it was definitely a topic that was worth getting out into the public space, right, to have that fight. But it makes one wonder if the upside is enough, right, or if it would be better for them to just be in the App Store and the Play Store, where they would get much more visibility and it would be much easier to download. Now, my guess is that the Android side isn't hurting them that much because, most of your high-end Android devices where you want the customers who are more likely to spend money, those people are on Samsung devices, and Fortnite is in the Galaxy Store. So it may not be as much of a bite there.
I forget that there's a Galaxy Store. Huh. Anyhow, let's move on to our next story here. Unless, gentlemen, anything else here on the Epic? Tal, thanks for bringing up the V-Bucks piece. I think that is an important combination of kind of connecting those dots between layoffs and price increases to go hand in hand in the same week of news stories for Epic. So, Tal, we just finished up the Writers Guild strike, and now you're telling me there's a new strike on the horizon. What's going on here?
Potentially, yeah. So SAG-AFTRA, which is the Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio, we're in talks actually, which I didn't realize it was this long, but the last 5 years, just trying to renegotiate their contract, which was actually, I believe, up last year, but then they did an extension. And I didn't see in either of the articles I have here, like when that, how long that extension is, as far as I can tell. But basically,
Is
they're in
this
talks.
strictly just for voice actors, or is it for all actors? I mean, because the Screen Actors Guild was also was also on strike in solidarity with the Writers Guild, but this is related to the voice actors as well. Is that correct? They
Yeah, for
authorize a video game strike. Yep.
yeah, voice actors and performers, it said, which is basically like when people are doing the
Motion capture,
motion
things like
capture.
that.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So they, like I said, they had been negotiating for the last few years. They extended it, but then this past week, the SAG itself, like the members, they authorized a video game strike if no deals have been met once that deadline has been reached. And then so that was the 26th. So then a few days later, the next article came out saying that they had been talking with all the big companies, Activision, EA, Epic Games, everybody, and they still haven't agreed on anything. So, which they didn't say they're striking yet. So I'm assuming that they're just waiting for that deadline to hit. But basically, what they're asking for in these negotiations is a wage increase. And in account for the inflation that's been going on, rest periods for on-camera performers, set medics to be present during stunt work, which I'm kind of surprised they didn't have anybody at least there, or at least on standby, and then protection, which is kind of a new thing. This last one that's just come up within the last year or so, protection against the unregulated use of AI in voice acting. So that's the kind of the different things they're trying to negotiate in these contracts. And like I said, they're authorized. There was a vote last week. I'm trying to find the numbers here. Over 35,600 members cast ballots, representing a percentage of about 27.47% of eligible voters, and about 98% of those approved the authorization to strike if necessary. So it's possible there might be a strike if there's no deal to be had. But like I said, when I was looking through these articles, I don't see how long the extension is. So I don't know. The fact that it was supposed to be due last year, I'm assuming like maybe another year, 6-9 months, maybe. I'm assuming, but like I said, they don't really say what the actual deadline is. But so a potential that we get another. This would be an actor strike. So I mean, another kind of blow to the video game industry after kind of COVID and we saw that all the delay on those games that happened, and this could possibly delay more games in the future. I mean, yeah, obviously they can always probably get people to come in and act. Obviously, because this is just a union basically for SAG, and I'm sure there's plenty of non-union workers out there that would jump in if they had the chance. But we'll have to see in the coming months to a year or so what happens with all this. So, any comments or concerns about what would happen here?
The one nuance that I was going to slide in there when DBQ asked his question. So just to kind of paint the picture. So the SAG-AFTRA actors who had already been on strike were striking for a TV, theater, and streaming contract. Those actors went on strike in mid-July. The SAG-AFTRA actors who are voice actors and mocap actors for video games had been on strike 2 or 3 years ago, had negotiated kind of like a ceasefire peace agreement, right, that was in place, and then kept getting extended. And so those actors were also back at the table, but had been undergoing negotiations. And then in late September, those negotiations went south. So that group also authorized a strike. So what we're seeing is an expansion into certain subgroups of the striking actions that are going on. And so now the jig is up, with video games as well.
Game Logic, why don't you stay on the mic here and we'll hit our last news story of the night. A few weeks ago, as we were talking about the CMA over in the UK giving preliminary approval to the Microsoft Activision Blizzard. A big part of that was Microsoft basically licensing off their streaming ability to Ubisoft. And so now we have some statements coming out from Ubisoft, not directly about this, but it definitely ties in to the fact that they have exclusive rights to the Microsoft Game Pass streaming aspects for the next 15 years. So, Game Logic, take us through that, the couple stories you have here.
Yeah, so the first main article over on VGC by Tom Ivan, Ubisoft believes game streaming will eventually take off and it will happen very quickly. Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot is betting on streaming revolutionizing the game industry in the same way it has transformed the TV and film business. The Assassin's Creed publisher recently agreed to acquire cloud gaming rights outside the European Economic Area for all Activision Blizzard games released over the next 15 years should Microsoft's $69 billion acquisition of the Call of Duty maker go through, as is now expected. So good old Yves was having a chat with the Financial Times and made some statements on how bullish he was about streaming. And I guess what came out of this is that the deal is structured under he says a one-off payment to Microsoft. I don't know if that means a one-time payment to seal the deal or exactly what that means. But what he gives reference to is how Netflix was kind of seen as a pirate and kind of a rogue and a cowboy player on the market. And he talks about how everybody criticized them. And he's like, oh, well, here we are. I think the cautionary tale I have about this, number one, I thought it was very interesting. I was like, you kind of said the same thing 6 years ago in 2017, that story over on Nintendo Life, Ubisoft CEO believes future of games industry is streaming with potential to reach 5 billion players in 10 years. I'm like, Yves, you're not really on track from that prediction you made back in 2017, not by a long shot. And so, I don't have any question that the future of games is streaming eventually. But that goes hand in hand with a lot of my futurist views of computing in general. The fact that, eventually we're going to get to a universal salary, goes hand in hand with progressive motions like that. I mean, at the end of the day, I think what's going to happen in the reality of the planet is that it's going to stop making sense for Tao to own an individual computer of which he uses like 23% of the capacity, but yet incurs all of the environmental impacts of one person owning that machine, but not utilizing it to its maximum capacity. It's going to make just far more sense to have consolidated compute where Tao's one computer can power the computing needs of 5 people, or 4 people. And that's just going to make more sense. And eventually we're going to get there. But I don't know that we're going to get there in lightning quick speed. I don't know that we're going to have business models for that. What's interesting, Ubisoft, despite as much of an Ubisoft stan as I am, I don't know that I would put I don't know that I would be taking investment advice from the business leadership of Ubisoft and utilizing them as a barometer of where I was going to put my stock money. So like I said, Yves just is making the same comment that he made a while ago, and using it obviously as a justification for why they decided to go down this path with Microsoft. I made comments last week about how I've seen this happen in other businesses, about the provider, the OEM provider winds up being the person who really pulls the strings of like these third-party storefronts that shop their services. And the same thing is true, like if you look at Siemens, right, and how, Siemens or Allen Bradley or these people, shop their wares through all of these authorized resellers, right? I mean, the reality is that the big company is still pulling the strings. My big problem, skepticism about this is what I didn't put in the rundown is what also has gone on this week is when the Xbox leaks happened a couple of weeks ago, the mainstream gaming media, in my opinion, really got it wrong, right? They hyper-focused on like the hardware charts, and a lot of these things that, were right on the surface and the new controller. But if you really dig through a lot of those documents and the emails, you will see things that are much deeper in insight of the Microsoft business model and what's going on. You will see, the breadcrumbs behind the testimony that Phil Spencer gave about, where the chart from the hardware group that says they need to be at 100 million Game Pass subscribers by 2030, And the fact that during testimony, Phil said, I think that chart isn't aggressive enough. And if we're only at 100 million subscribers by 2030, I think we'll be packing up shop and we won't be continuing as a business. Now, some of that may have been a MacGuffin, but Phil Spencer thinks they need to be at 130 million subscribers. I mean, Phil Spencer's thinking that they need to quadruple the size of their current subscriber base in 6 years, right? And so here's Eve saying that he thinks streaming is going to blow up, but going back to what he said in 2016, the market's not on pace to make what his predictions were then. Jump forward now 6 years later to when he's paying however much he's paying or made whatever deal he made with Microsoft. By the way, Microsoft is, I'm sure all of Ubisoft offering content is going to be backed by, lucrative discounts and deals if those things are propped up on Azure, but that's another topic. But my point is that, none of these things seem to be on pace. None of these, the things he's pointing to Netflix, Netflix was there, but the cost to support video content streaming, television show streaming is not nearly what it is to do video games. So a lot of these things are converging around, prediction paths that don't show this business being as big as some people think it's going to be in 6 years' time, including Microsoft themselves. And again, I'm talking about, yes, those predictions are Microsoft talking about Game Pass, but again, if you go back to some deeper digging and deeper insights and deeper analysis of what came out of the Xbox leaks, you would see, if Game Pass doesn't hit those numbers, then the main thing pushing game streaming is Game Pass. And so, where Game Pass goes, so does Xbox Cloud streaming. And if Xbox Cloud gaming, if Game Pass isn't going, then Xbox Cloud gaming isn't going to accelerate right at an equal or even greater pace as Ubisoft here is thinking here.
I really appreciate that you pulled out the Game Pass cloud pieces from the Microsoft kind of leak from a couple weeks ago, because that was one of the things that stood out to me. For all the FTC's focus, for all the kind of Activision Blizzard Call of Duty aspects, in some ways the CMA was onto something. Reading through those internal documents, once you get kind of past the juicy leaks of new platforms and things that grab headlines, the real business aspects in there really were how much Microsoft is seeing the future in cloud-based, in streaming-based games. And whether or not they can hit that or not, it's a whole different piece, but there is a direction that they are pushing, certainly based on those documents, at least at the time the documents were created. Again, we don't know how recent, how timely those documents are.
And let me tie another caboose onto that, right? A lot of these maneuvers that are being made by Microsoft, they're not being made despite all of the console warring and quite frankly, what the almost entirety of Twitter content has become. The things Microsoft is doing have very little to do with Sony and very little to do with Nintendo. They are defensive maneuvers to keep Amazon and Google. And again, if you dig into the documents, you will see where this is written by Microsoft. That their intention, I can't remember if I mentioned this last week or not, their intention in doing the things that they're doing is it is, again, if you've gone back and you've studied the Cold War and studied warfare, what Microsoft is doing is they are making it clear for Amazon and Google that should you attempt to enter this space, it will be a resounding defeat. Like spooling that up, it should just be a non-starter for you. His point is to create the clear signal and the impression that the head start that they have in MAU, in monthly active users, is so great that Amazon and Google won't catch up. And if Amazon and Google come into this space to compete, they're not coming in with a new console. They're coming in through the cloud. And so that is why the emphasis is on that market. That is why the emphasis is on, so much of their strategy is because if they're going to keep Amazon and Google out, they're not going to do it by doubling down on a super uber powerful, more powerful Xbox Series umpty scrunch, right? Because Amazon and Google aren't going to build a console. That would make no sense. The strength for those companies is in the cloud. They're the number one and the number 3 cloud providers on the planet. with Microsoft sandwiched in the middle. If they're going to come to the fight, they're going to come to the fight with their strength. And so, that's the reason Microsoft is making the moves they're making. And those are the things that are going to keep Amazon and Google out. For console players, right, what I keep saying and the things that I keep providing some caution on is, and again, dig into the documents, you'll see this. You'll see Phil Spencer saying, if we're going to hit the growth numbers that we need to hit, those customers lie outside the console, right, addressable market. That growth, right, so you're at 25 million subscribers now. Probably half of them are somewhere between 12 and 16 million of them are on console. To get to 130 million, those people are coming not from the console space. So the question you have to ask yourself, in my opinion, is if you're a console focused player, and you don't have to be, like there's plenty of people who I think love the Xbox ecosystem, who do actually love the fact that, I love the fact that I can play on PC and I can play on console, and there's ubiquity across those two platforms for Xbox, and all my accounts and all my stuff sync, right? That's great. And if more Xbox content was in other places and I could do the same thing, that's great. I'm not particularly jazzed by playing my Xbox games on mobile, right? But it's nice for people who can. But like, if you're a console focused player, the thing I keep questioning people in terms of is what you're arguing for. Does what you're arguing for really make sense? You need to understand that Xbox's primary concern is not about the console, because they're not going to get to 130 million players by selling more consoles, because they're not going to sell more consoles. They've said that they're not going to sell more consoles, right? In vast, large numbers, right? And you dig through those documents, I'm sorry, I'm going on, but you dig through those documents and you'll see things like them looking at next generation Xbox on x64 ARM, right? That's not because they want to give you a super uber powerful ray tracing 24 teraflop monster on your desk. That is because, and you go back and you can find the breadcrumbs for this, that is because they want, by the way, they're not selling a ton of Xbox Series X's because they're not making a ton of Xbox Series X's. They're selling a ton of Xbox Series S's because that's what they're making. Those Series X's, a lot of those are going in the data centers to be the backbone for Xbox cloud gaming. And that is why the hardware group wants an x64 ARM-based Xbox console to go in the data center to be able to support. Right now, the Xbox Series X, I think part of its hardware backing was around supporting like 4 concurrent streaming sessions. They're looking at a box that could possibly be x64 ARM to put it in a data center to support more than that, right? And that's more important to them than necessarily rendering higher fidelity graphics for you on your desktop. So that's in the part of the documentation stack that maybe that's not Xbox's strategy. Phil Spencer hasn't approved that, but the point is that the hardware group, right, one of the devices team, the team that's responsible for putting up the proposals for Phil Spencer to approve or disapprove for what Xbox becomes from a hardware perspective, that group, part of them is focused on, maybe we should go x64 ARM. So my point is that there's consumers need to be considering about where they're going to make their bets and where they're going to put their investment. We talk about people spending $500 to put in a console to, for a 7-8 year life cycle. That's just part of the things that, people I think need to consider.
Thank you, Game Logic. No, I think there's a lot there, right? The multiple things to unpack there. I think it really is something for all people who watch the industry to keep an eye on and to see what that looks like, because you're right. Like, in order to hit those numbers, it is not about existing players. It's about converting and bringing in new people. Personally, I am now shopping around to pre-order my Umpty Scrunch that you were talking about. You made it sound really powerful. So I need to figure out where I can pre-order this Umpty Scrunch and how much I'm going to be able to have to put down for it.
That sounds better than Xbox Series Y or X or Z. So
it's a lot of letters on the side of a box. So.
Hey, while I say that, I would love to have an x64 ARM-based video game console, right? Because I'm a guy who loves hardware and like weird, funky stuff. But I don't know that the guy looking to play like Halo Infinite at 120 frames per second. I don't know that that's the box that they need.
Right. Like, this logic feels very similar to when Game Pass streaming was announced, right? Like, the idea of a Series S made a lot of sense if half of what you play was going to be streamed. Like, Sure, you don't need the big, powerful stuff if you can stream that. But there's a lot more there. We will continue to come back to it as we always do with the industry, because it's whether it is changing technology, changing employment and financial landscapes, there is always something for us to be talking about here on Enough to Keep Going. But as we head into our final segment, let's look at what else we've been playing before we wrap up for the night. Tao, you mentioned this at the top of the hour, that yes, you still have continued to chip away at a little bit of Starfield. Is it taking a back seat, or is it like where's your level of investment and engagement with Starfield at this point, a month after release?
Yeah, no, I almost play it every day, pretty much, at least like an hour or so. I can do like maybe one or two side missions at a time, depending on how long it is. I'm pretty much doing side missions right now, kind of the side quests, and I forgot what the other thing is called. It's not like a miscellaneous or activities or something like that. I always forget. But yeah, I'm still going through those. I mentioned last week I want to try to do an outpost finally, which I kind of sort of started to do. I actually plunked down like the main like beacon or whatever that you do when you first want to start an outpost, and then I realized everything else that I need to build that outpost needed like one ingredient that I just left. The area I just left had like just mounds of, I think it was aluminum that I was looking I needed for like everything else to build. Like it was the one thing I needed, and of course the area I'm in now doesn't have anything in it, so I was like, oh, come on, man. So I tore that down, or I removed that one, and I'm going to try to go back to that spot I was at before, but then I got distracted, and Bethesda way that something popped up and I saw. I was like, oh, let me go check this real quick before I do that, and then I just went off on a tangent. So I'm just going through, just trying to do that, and then eventually I'll make my way back to that same spot, because there's literally just like big swaths of areas that had aluminum in it. So I was like, all right, I'll plumb my thing down there and start extracting or doing what I need to do and getting to that portion of it. I also want to go back to some of the faction quests, because there's one that I had stopped doing at one point. It was a ship battle one, so I wanted to try to beef up. I had actually got another ship, probably like midweek or so. I forgot I was on some quest that I had to take out some guys, and I did that. And I was able to get on their ship and take that over. So I got a new like massive. It must be like a cargo ship, because it's got like 840 units of storage. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to use this now. But and the shields are pretty beefy too, so I'll probably have to beef up the weapons, and maybe I'll try to do the other quest. So I'll probably be doing that also this coming week. But no, I'm still having a lot of fun with it. I know a lot of people are kind of dogging it now. Maybe after now all this, the hype and the newness has wore off. People are still complaining about the UI, which I understand. Like the UI is kind of not the best out there, but all the load times and all that, and I don't know, it just doesn't bother me. Like this is like the perfect game that I was waiting for. Like it's just a Bethesda game, like I keep saying, and it's just what I wanted. So it's space, so I always like the space games.
Nice. Well, I'm glad the fact that you're investing some time each day in it really does speak to that it's hooked you, and it's something where you're not in a race to try to churn through its content. You're just enjoying playing it. So,
yep.
All right. Game logic. Last week you talked about a little bit of Insomniac swinging by some webs, fighting crime on the ledge. But you've got something else in your playlist as well. So why don't you take us through what else has been filling your gaming week up?
Well, we've got 17 minutes left before drop dead time. I'm going to try and bull speed through mine, because DBQ is trying to take NBA 2K24 off the list, but I'm bound and determined to turn this into a sports gaming podcast. So very quickly, I'd been playing Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales on PC. I switched to picking up my PS5 instance of the campaign this week, just collected more suits. I've got a large number of them, including one that I just popped tonight was the Uptown Pride suit, which is like the standard Spider-Man Miles Morales suit, but with gold webbing, which I thought was pretty awesome. And then because I wanted to make sure I had a bit check that came up where I wanted to make sure I was using my PlayStation 5 subscription on PS Plus, and so I pulled Wolfenstein: The New Order out of the backlog. I was just playing that on PS5, which I've played on a few other platforms, but it's a nice little kind of reboot of the series. I think it's the one that precedes the new Colossus.
Yes.
Wolfenstein continuity and lore is really wackadoodle all over the place. So it's off stuff for me to.
New Order isn't that the kind of the Bethesda the kind of kickoff of the old one? I mean, and then the like prequel, sequel, DLC follow up was Old Blood, right? Yeah.
Oh, by the way, one thing that I definitely caught and realized while playing this is between id Software and Machine Games, I actually prefer Machine Games' shooting mechanics to id's. It's done some other things with their engine. I think id is maybe more an engine specialist group, I would say. But shooting mechanics, I really like how Wolfenstein feels. The defaults for the controller in terms of dead space and speed of swing right on the horizontal and vertical axes were pretty much spot on and perfect for me on Wolfenstein, where usually I have to get in there and fuddle around to make them work well for me. But they were pretty spot on.
Nice. I can appreciate feeling like you need to make use of your PlayStation subscriptions because last 2 weeks they had put out a bunch of the old Star Ocean games or a bunch of the previous generation Star Oceans. After I played the demo of the one coming in November, it kind of spent a little bit of time churning and dabbling in and sampling those, right? It feels like I could play a little bit without having to invest in a 20, 40, 60 hour RPG just to get a sense of what it's like. But speaking of PlayStation and subscriptions, this week they did do a 3-hour, or there is now a 3-hour trial of NBA 2K24 on PlayStation if you are a PlayStation Plus any tier subscriber, even the low tier, I believe. So yes, I downloaded that. I had not played it yet in terms of 24. Usually I play NBA 2K. I've been playing it on Xbox, but I'll take the trial. And one of the things I say that in, like, I'm really curious what you want to know about Game Logic, because in a 3-hour trial, I've played maybe 2 hours. Played a game of basketball, spent a lot of time in menus. Like, it does the actual game on the court is great. Like, NBA 2K as a series, if you are just going to play some basketball, it's great. It is. The defense feels a little more, the animations after I've been going back over the last couple months and playing more of my career in 23, and the animations on defense feel, I don't know, they look like people are actually moving. Like it maybe I'm just closer to the screen, but they seems to have captured some more of the defensive animations, and it flows as a game of basketball should. There's a lot of fluidity. It doesn't drastically change things, but it's such a peak of its class in terms of on the court action. The challenge of it in a 3-hour trial or in anything but grabbing the $100 edition that gives you another 100,000 in VC. Like, if you're not going to do the franchise aspect so one of the things that it does, and I've done this in the last season as well, the last year, in addition to kind of a modern era franchise, last year they introduced the eras where you had the Michael Jordan draft class in the mid 80s. Then you had, mid 90s, and you had an early 2000s. So you had different kind of generations. This year they keep those and then add in Kobe Bryant's draft class as another era that you can start in that kind of later 90s with Bryant being drafted. And that draft class, and kind of historically go up from there. I've played through a season or two on like the Michael Jordan one last year, going back into the mid 80s, and they do things where you get historic rules and you can vote to, as those changes come up, you can vote to either approve or basically disable them. So you could continue to play the same with like franchise moves. Like I had the option after that first season to not have the Seattle Supersonics move and keep them there, right? Like, so just they've added. It feels like last year was such a high watermark in terms of all the Michael Jordan content that they did, all the 3 different eras, that the outside of the game aspect, it feels a little lighter. I mean, it's all there, but they've added. The Michael Jordan stuff is not there. They now have Kobe Bryant moments. There's about 8 of them. So, and they've added one other era. Eventually, I don't know that they have many other spaces to go on the eras unless they go back further into, like, you go to the Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar 70s, right? Like, there are possibilities. You could, especially with like Winning Time on HBO, you could go back and do the Magic and Bird time. Like, so there are places for them to go, but eventually that starts to run its course. Yeah, microtransactions, right? Like, if you're going to play the My Team stuff where you got to build a team and open packs, you're going to spend money. If you're going to do the story mode, one of the things that they did that I really like in the story mode is that you to go to the gym to get your boosts, to do your training, you're all still in the same facility, where in the last few years on the current consoles, you've had to kind of run multiple blocks across the city or skateboard across the city, right? It's just killing time in a space that is spent so much time running back and forth from places. And so condensing that down, but at the same time, if you're not paying, you're starting at like a 60. So even if you're not going to want to be competitive in like the multiplayer park stuff, even if you just want to go through the story mode, at a 60, it's going to take you quite a while before you could be viable on a starting franchise, right? So there is, if you're looking for those things, it is a struggle. If you're not going to invest that, if you're not going to spend on top of the $70 that you're already spending on the game. But if you just want to play basketball, like Game Logic talked about, just want to play soccer, like, yeah, you don't have to engage with all those other components if you just want to play a sports game, and it's a really solid sports game.
So one question I want to ask is, you and I both mentioned this notion of like, for people who play these sports games fairly frequently, and it's a good part of their repertoire, like, what is the reality of your first few hours in each of these things, right? Like MLB The Show, great Scott, man. Like the first several hours, like tuning sliders. And so one question I want to ask you is this whole notion, because more and more sports games are going to this notion of, let me let the players get in for, I annualize the series and it's always coming out. So I want to give people an opportunity to show them whether or not the game's really worth their time. And that's like my compromise with the consumer market about these annualized things. But with a sports game, as we've talked about, right, if you're going to give somebody a 10-hour trial, they're going to spend 2-3 hours tuning, right? Is there anything, and so part of me wonders, like, maybe these trials, maybe these demos should, like, not give you all that. Like, just give you, like, don't let you start career mode.
Make it a demo, right? Not a trial.
Right.
Like, here's what the gameplay is like. Yeah, I mean, I kind of chuckled as I was downloading this 3-hour trial. Like, in years past when I've played my career mode, the first 45 minutes is half cutscenes and, doing a little bit of things here and there and waiting for menus to load. Like, I'm going to eat through half my time just going through things that I'm not actually playing. Or if you try to jump into a franchise, the complexity of NBA franchises and the management and the salary cap aspects and the franchise fees and luxury fees, like, there is a lot there that you will spend time just digging through menus to get something started. So that's why I kind of dove in just to play, to feel how it was like. And then like, okay, then I dabbled a little bit in my career just because I don't know, since 2019. I've played every My Career. I've played 2 different versions of it in 21 when it had 2 different storylines between the Xbox One and Xbox Series. But at 3 hours, there's only so much you can do. So yeah, right. Like if you could give me a demo of like, like the opening game in MLB The Show where it allows you to kind of modify the controls. You're playing somebody from the World Series, right? It just gives you a chance to what the game feels like versus the full on aspect. But I think going back to the monetization aspect, right? The benefit of a 3-hour trial is, oh man, I just invested all this. I built my character, right? In My Career, you're going to spend the first half hour, actually going to spend a lot more time before you even launch the game, looking online to figure out what your viable builds are in order to not just make a clunky basketball player that's not going to be very functional on the court. Like you're going to spend 20 minutes to a half hour speccing everything out, creating your character model, getting the right haircut, the right facial expressions, then going through all the stat pieces and putting points in. All of those things are going to eat up some time. But now you've invested that time. Don't you just want to buy the rest of the game so you can keep playing, right? Like I could see where, they did exactly this on the PlayStation Store, is that this week, while the trial launched, you could get 15% off NBA 2K24. Doesn't that sound good? Right? Like there's an economic incentive in that as well. Even though it really, from a consumer standpoint, there's only so much you can do at 3 hours. I do want to say before I move off this, talking about the complexity of the NBA franchise, the My NBA pieces that 2K has had. This year they do a My NBA Lite, which from somebody who's played 40 some seasons of Madden over the last few years, it cuts down all the other kind of complexities with the NBA, and all you're doing is drafting, and you're drafting, salary capping, and playing. It even simplifies some of the salary cap pieces. So that is a new feature here as well for people that, if it has been intimidating to dive into some of that, you get the option of streamlining that down. So Game Logic did it. He turned this again into a sports podcast, or at least a sports gaming podcast. We have not gone into the fact that Towmasters Bears still have not won a game, but that's okay. We'll save that for another time because eventually it'll happen. Towmaster, looks like you're going to... I'm curious, if you spent some more time with Disney SpeedStorm, I'd love to hear your son's impression of it as well, right? Like, how's it from a kid perspective? Like, so if you end up playing it some more next week, I'll be very curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to get him going in it. And then obviously I'll play a little bit more of Paleo Pines this coming week.
Sounds good. I'm sure I know that after this podcast, I'm going to go up and do my dailies for Disney SpeedStorm. It is interesting. I'll be very curious to see once it drops on Android and iOS to see how it controls, because it could be very easy to check in, do some of it, because you get daily missions, which give you points towards your season pass. And if it's all linked together, I could definitely see this as something where I'm dropping in and out, playing at different points in time on different platforms. So,
I was going to ask you that too, if it was coming to mobile, because
yes,
I knew it came for everything else.
I got the email announcement. It's on the stores now for pre-registration, right? It is not launched yet, but it is pre-registration. So while we are driving some carts around, looks like Game Logic is going to be trying some Euro Truck Simulator 2, some big rig hauling over the next week or so, potentially, is what he has down here. But now that he's back on camera, we'll ask him himself. Game Logic, what's on your list for next week as you head into the start?
Well, Bob, you're exactly right. But I'll I'm hoping to get into European Truck Simulator. I've got a bit of an on-ramp to get there. The whole schmuck behind this is that, I'm supposed to set up my other racing wheel, the Thrustmaster T300 RS. I have a stand for that's been sitting here for a month or two that I just I need to get it out of the box, need to put the other wheel on it, and then need to get it hooked up to European Truck Simulator 2, which is a game that I haven't played before. I've played American Truck Simulator. I have not stepped over to ETS, but I have that on the list of things to do this week. I've about wrapped up my time in this session for Marvel Spider-Man. I do want to play some more EA Football Club 24, so I got those things in my windshield first, but I'm hoping to get over to ETS with all the wheel setup and all that stuff this week. So we'll see how it goes.
That sounds good. Well, and Game Logic U will be our host next week as we dive into episode 311 for those of you that want to give us a soundtrack related to next week's episode. So this has been episode 310 for the E2KG. Enough to keep going for myself, DBQ Hams, Game Logic, and Towmaster. Gentlemen, it's been great having these conversations. Thank you for everybody who has listened and viewed over the last week. We really appreciate your engagement, and we're looking forward to continuing that with you as well as we keep on going here. So until next week, play the games you love those you play with, and be kind to yourself. Good night, everybody.